select the template, which architecture they want to deploy on. This is effectively hard-coded to x386 and ARM64. The choice of templates they get, and ISOs, by the way, choice of templates they get is based on what the administrator has set when templates, ISOs, and Kubernetes versions are created. Okay. Now, this is specified at the cluster level. So a zone can have different types of architectures in it. So you could have, you know, ARM64 compute resources and x386, and it's up to the user to choose. You can then, as a service provider, you could build different amounts for different architectures or what have you. And it's really good to see this sort of legitimized, if you like, in CloudStack 4.20. A couple of screenshots there when adding a cluster on specifying what the architecture type is. When registering a template, I specify what it is, and then the user can choose things that match that particular architecture. Okay, the next feature is shared file systems, and some people might argue this is a bit of technical debt with CloudStack. One of the sort of part of the ethos of CloudStack as a community for a number of years has been about keeping the scope tight, and CloudStack remaining a pure IaaS layer and not creeping up into providing paths, for example, and other such things. But for a long time, people have been saying, look, we need something like EFS. Okay, we don't want to have to create an instance and then put a file system on it and then share that and then access that through our other instances. We want to be able to just say, look, we want a new file system and we want to start putting files into that file system and reading from that file system. So shared file systems is the new feature in 4.20. And it's a first-class feature, so it's right up there in the menu. You go to File Systems, choose New Shared File System, go through a very simple screen, okay? And what CloudStack will do here is deploy an instance. It will put the file share technology on that instance. It's currently got a provider for NFS, either XFS or XT4, but this is a framework model. So if somebody wanted to use Ceph, for example, to provide the file systems directly, they can do that. We've got a framework model and people can add new providers into that framework model. There's a whole load of new API commands for doing this as well. And it gives, you know, a very easy time saver for users and gives them effectively file service as a service. Okay. Next new feature is the usage management UI. As I'm sure most of you know on this call, CloudStack has got a comprehensive usage tracking system, and then users use that, use the CloudStack API or directly access the database to get that usage data and pump it into billing systems or line of business systems or what have you. And the usage server runs as a separate service. It's pretty reliable. It sits there quietly doing its stuff and crunching its numbers every day or every week or whenever you want to do your billing. But when it goes wrong, it can be really difficult, traditionally really difficult to troubleshoot. So this usage management UI, which is an admin-only feature, is designed to allow you to troubleshoot the usage server. It lets you browse the usage data that's being generated, find entries, sort entries, export them out to CSV so you can do other things with them. And it then lets you regenerate the usage metrics in CloudStack. As an admin, and somebody I work with CloudStack all the time, I've already played with this and I found this really, really useful. It's not designed as a new integration point for CloudStack. It's just as an admin tool to make operational efficiency a little bit easier for people. Okay, it seems to be talking about that again. Okay, next new feature, webhooks. Sure, everybody knows what a webhook is. It's a endpoint that can be called by a system, so that system can notify that endpoint that a particular event has occurred. Examples: when somebody creates an instance, when somebody creates a VM, you want to trigger some sort of approval workflow. When a new user joins CloudStack, you want to trigger some other sort of workflow. When some sort of provisioning, network provisioning is done, you want something to trigger to go and provision some other elements in your network. Now, you've always been able to do this as an administrator in CloudStack using the CloudStack message bus. And I know lots of organizations, a lot of you probably here today, do that already. But webhooks gives us the ability to do that from a user account. So a user can create a new webhook and then create an endpoint for that webhook to handle the events that are coming out and take whatever workflow action they want based on events that are coming out of CloudStack. So big new piece of functionality. I think it's an expected piece of functionality. We have similar stuff in GitHub, in AWS, but now your users can do that from CloudStack. If you're doing this from an admin account, say, I stress it is user functionality, but if you're creating a webhook from an admin account, the admin can actually choose the scope of the webhook, whether it's local, domain-based, or global, i.e. account-based, domain-based, or global. Now, with this first release of webhooks, there is no further filtering. It'd be up to your webhook endpoint to parse the events and find the ones it wants, the ones that are of interest. But I know there's already discussions happening about refining this functionality going forward, so people can create multiple webhooks with, effectively where clauses and criteria applied. Another feature that's about operational efficiency and actually also a little bit about scalability as well. There's a lot of organizations starting to use CloudStack at some pretty dramatic scale now. In air quotes, hyperscale style clouds being run with Apache CloudStack. So this functionality is about just making the experience easier from an admin viewpoint when you're running things at massive scale. Now, this is based around CloudStack's tagging model, and tags they're probably one of the single most powerful things in CloudStack. We can effectively tag any resource and allocate their resources to a user based on tagging. It's a very extensible, very flexible model. But the problem with tags is administrators had to add those manually. Now you could do it, you could automate it by calling the API, but if you add, let's say, 1,000 new hosts to a large CloudStack environment, and you want to tag those hosts, you would actually then have to retrospectively, after adding those hosts, go and create those tags either through the API or through the UI. And what this new functionality allows you to do is based on a file that can be deployed on a host, on a hypervisor host, CloudStack will then read that file and create tags automatically for that host. It uses the agent's properties file, which has been there forever and a day. So people can use this to, for example, specify the host they've added's got GPUs in it. It's got it might be for different types of storage, different types of network card, etc., etc. And CloudStack will then automatically read that agent's properties file and create those tags next to that host. So there's an example there. There's a host in CloudStack, and you will see there that the H1, H2, H3 are API defined. They're traditional tags, but then CPU 32 GPU type, okay, has been defined by the agent's properties file. You can to set that up. All you need to do is basically go and add them into the agent's properties file, and then CloudStack will then recognize those tags. Again, another feature about ease of management and also around scale are some more granular resource limits. Now, limits are how we control what resources a user can have. How many instances can they have? How much primary storage can they have? How much secondary storage can they have? And these limits have been, called what they are, effectively hard-coded for years in CloudStack. They're based on the usage metrics, obviously, but what we could control for a user in terms of limits was effectively controlled by the people who developed CloudStack. And this new model, lets us get much more granular and get extensible around this. So what we can do is specify a tag, okay, and specify in global settings that that tag is going to now be used for limits. So it's using the same tagging architecture, and you could even use the new agent properties tagging method that we looked at a second ago. It's using the tags to then allow those to be used to apply limits. So what we end up with is here's a screenshot here. Okay, max user instances. That's been around forever and a day. That's one of the hard-coded limits that's been in CloudStack. But I've now created one by creating a tag, mapping that to a service offering. I've now created one called max arm64. That's me. I can give that any name I wanted. And I've now effectively got an extensible limits model where I could limit absolutely anything as long as it can be tagged in CloudStack. And that's a really, really useful tool. Now, CloudStack in lots of different areas uses frameworks. It's one of the approaches that the development community has taken for a number of years now, is that whenever there is any integration with anything, rather than just integrating that technology, let's create a framework so other people, like a driver model, a provider model, so other people, other vendors can then easily come and do that integration. We've got two new providers shipping CloudStack 420. First one is for the backup and recovery framework, and there's a lot of activity in this space at the moment, driven by a lot of what's been going on around the hypervisor markets. So far, we've got Veeam, Dell, Backroll have all got integrations into that framework. I know of a couple of other backup vendors who are also currently in the process of doing integration to that framework. But there's now a simple NAS-based backup provider. And this is, as its name suggests, just very simple. It's native to CloudStack. If an organization doesn't want to use an external backup provider through the framework, you can use this simple NAS-based backup provider. And as its name suggests, it's creating some NAS storage, integrating to the backup and recovery framework, and letting users then run backups of instances out to that NAS. On the object storage side, so the object storage framework was introduced actually in the last release in 4.19. And when it was introduced, it shipped with a provider for MinIO. There is now a provider for Ceph RGW that ships with 420. And in progress is a provider for one of Huawei's storage platforms that should be shipping hopefully in 421. So it's good to see lots of development around these frameworks, further integrations with CloudStack. Okay, that is pretty much all of the features I'm going to talk you through. Because we're getting into networking territory, which is much more Marco's space than mine, I'm going to hand over to Marco, who's going to talk you through the networking features and run you a demo. Over to you, Marco. I can't hear you, Marco.
Okay, I am alive. I am alive. So, well, thank you guys for joining with us to show the new features in CloudStack 420. Well, the VMware NSX is just one more integration for SDN support in CloudStack for VMware platform. So let's dive into this new feature. Wait a minute. So this is a new network element similar to the Tungsten you already have integrated with CloudStack. In that case, the NSX version 4 is supported. The NSX could be configured at the zone level. It works as any other isolation method like VXLAN, VLAN, or Tungsten Fabric, for example. And it just used like to offload the network operation, replacing in that case the virtual router by the NSX SDN. When you are setting, for example, the zone, you can select, in that case, the NSX provider, and the NSX public traffic and define your configuration. So NSX in that case supports a virtual private cloud, isolated network, Kubernetes service, so you can use all of these resources to network, for example, with the NSX. It supports the entire operation you have in that traditional network used in CloudStack, something like routing between VPC tiers, for example. So NSX do the segments, and you can control the traffic between the tiers. You have access lists between the VPC tiers and also to the public network, similar to the traditional VLAN network. Also support port forward between public network and VPC when you are using, for example, the netting networks, external load balance as well, internal load balance between the tiers in case of VPC, supports password injection, user data, our operation SSH keys, so you can manage, deploy your instance and have the user data completely useful using NSX. External, internal DNS, DHCP, some of the services provided by virtual router like DHCP, DNS, and user data password injection and SSH. But the traffic management is made by the NSX in that case. Kubernetes host orchestration as well, so it's you have a completely full functionality you have in the CloudStack using in NSX in the VMware environments. So now let's talk about the dynamic and static routing. This featuring is how cloud operator manage network traffic in complex environments. So let's dive in. Before the release 4.20, so Apache CloudStack relied on NAT for virtual routers. I mean, NAT is really functional and efficient, considering when considering, for example, conservate scarce IPv4 addresses. But the problem is NAT introduces processing overhead due to address translation, which it impacts the performance in scenarios requiring direct routing, for example, and advanced network scalability. In another hand, when you use routed network, instances are directly assigned with a public IP addresses. The virtual router, in that case, continue acting as a firewall and upstream router for the isolated VPC network in that case. So the routing, using routing in that case in the virtual router, it provides a low overhead and high throughput, achieving a performance gain something around 2 and 2.5 times more efficient compared with NATed networks. The challenge here is related how you will configure your public network. So your upstream router need to be configured because the VR must know how to forward the package between the isolated VPC network to the internet and another side from the internet to the VPC and isolated network. For a static network, in that case, administrator have to add, for example, routes for each network they are creating manually in the upstream router. In case of a dynamic routing, administrators can just need to configure the BGP in the upstream router. And so in that case, the routers will be automatically advertised to the virtual routers via BGP protocol. So when now, when the administrator are adding a new network offering or VPC offering, there are new fields here. The network mode, to be clear, it's possible to continue using netted network in that case, but when selected routed, you have two options in that case, routing mode, static or dynamic. So when the user create a new network, they need just to select the network offering. Optionally, they can define the CIDR size. In that case here is 28, but the minimum and the maximum for VPC and for isolated network is you can configure it in the global settings. When using dynamic routing, for example, you have at the zone level two new tabs to define the AS number and the BGP peer. So it's just to you need first to configure your upstream router, get the information there, and set it in the CloudStack at zone level. After the VM are created, so they will have the information about the upstream IPv4 and IPv6 routes, and they have two. It's not like isolated network using netted or VPC, because in that case they control directly the IPv4 route in firewall and IPv6 as well. So security group in shared network. So it's important to say that this feature is very interesting for the organization that need to use a public IP directly in the instance and control the traffic using a security group. In that case, previously in CloudStack, it is only supported in the basic and advanced zone with security group. Now it's possible, for example, they use the wide network offering CloudStack can offer, like isolated, VPC, and also security group using the shared network, so in advanced zone. It offers that for the user the flexibility to select the network for their specific use case, so they can create an isolated network, a routed network, VPC, and routed VPC, and also security group in shared network. In that case, the instance can have a public IP address set, and it improves accessibility, and they can control the traffic flow between the internet and the instance using security group. Here, just to show here, you have two new options in the menu. A new option in the menu under network, you have security group. So you can add new security groups, and after configuring it and configure the ingress and egress rules for this specific security group. Well, now it's a CloudStack 420 live demo. I will show some features here. You have some words, Giles?
No, thank you, Marco. Excited to see the demo.
Okay. So this feature, I will present these features. Let me just share my screen. Wait a minute, please.
Let's hope the demo gods are with you today, Marco.
Just a second, please. So here we are. So let's explain a little bit about the ARM support and multi-architecture zones here. Let me just move the list here. So now in CloudStack, it's possible to run in the same zone different architectures of CPU. For example, let me go to the admin interface. Under infrastructure, when you select a cluster, there is a new flag here, arc. So define the cluster architecture type in that case. So you have here x8664 cluster. All hosts in that case, in that cluster, needed to be in the same architecture.
And you set that when you create the cluster, right?
Exactly that. When you are adding a new cluster in CloudStack, you have the option to select the architecture. Yeah. So, for example, when you want to add a new instance, you can have different templates based on the architecture. In that case, I have two templates here to exemplify. And it's important to say, when I am creating a new template, I have a new option here, architecture, to define the architecture type is the CPU. So you just select one of these, not only for the templates, but also to the ISO images. You have the options here. I already have some ISO files here, and also to Kubernetes, you have the option to define the architecture. So, and in that case, you can run multiple architecture instances with different architectures in that case. Let's move to the next feature, shared file system. I think someone asked something in the chat. Let me explain a little bit about this. So this is a new type of system VM, something like that, but in the level of user. It's a multi-tenant one. Each user can create your own shared file system. So let me log in. When you are creating, you need to define a name, so the zone and the file system that will be formatted to be used as a shared file system. I think XFS is more performatic, but ext4 is guarantee better the data in the disk. So the network that this special instance will be located, and you can select as well the disk size to define the amount of disk you want to share with your other instance. So after the instance is created, it's a new object, it's a completely new resource here in CloudStack. It's similar to the instance, but is a trick different because you have the access tab here that show how to mount it in the other instance. In my case, I have some instances running in this same network. So these three here, they are mounting the NFS to share the file system. So I think it is really clear. And the next feature, usage management UI. So as administrator, it's important to say that you have a new option under tools, it's here, usage. So it is just to simplify because you don't have it before in the UI. So you have it before in the API. Now you can, for example, in a simple way, to select and track the operations that users had, the resource usage here in the UI, from the start date and end date and time. You can check specifically operation usage here for the user. Also have the option to have it as JSON configuration. So that's it. It's important. I think it's a nice feature to use, for example, to track faster than to recur to the API to do that. Well, the next feature now is I will talk about the CloudStack webhooks. Very nice feature. I think it is a debt CloudStack had in the past, and in the forthwent you are covering that one. So what you need to do, you need to create a new webhook. You need to define a name, a description, a payload URL, in that case the endpoint of external system you want to add here, and the secret key. And so after it is added, so you have the delivery of events you deliver to the remote webhook server. So in that case, let me do some operation here just to exemplify. Let me just get this instance here and stop it. So first, here is possible to see in the webhooks, it was delivered VM stop. And if I have here just to test, webhook tester was delivering the VM stop call, the event to the remote webhook system, something like to integrate with monitoring and alert system to alert the support team that something happened in your cloud. You can filter it based in the events you consider important to be monitored.
And the important thing is that you're doing that as a user, right, Marco? That's not just an admin only function.
Exactly that. Yeah, it's just for use, not for admin. For sure, you can use as admin as well to monitor something related to the entire cloud in that case. Well, next feature here. Let's talk about the implicit hardware-based host tag. Let me start from the beginning. Let me open a shell here. So I'm connecting in a KVM host. This feature is supported only for KVM. So I have this new flag here in the agent properties, host tag. When I am deploying my KVM host, for example, if I want to automatize this, I'm thinking in the large scale it makes sense to have this feature. For example, I tag here two different tags, authentic AMD and GPU. So if I go to the infrastructure and get the KVM1 host here, I have it both host tagged here. The next feature you explain a little bit how can you work with this. Traditional you have, for example, to tag some specific computer offering to use this specific host tag, but you can extend it for a granular resource. That's this one new feature you talk about, the granular resource limits. So the granular resource limit, for example, when you create, for example, some specific offering. In that case, I get the implicit hardware-based host tag I created in the KVM1, and let me find it here. So I have here host tag GPU. So, and not only for the host, but I can do it, for example, as well for the primary storage, for example. Let me show this here. I tag it as tag premium SSD in that case. So and I created as well a disk offering with this tag, to use this tag here in that case. It's the same I did for the compute offering. So in that case, I have some instance created based on this compute and some disk created on the disk offerings. So if I go to account, so let me select an account, configure limits, as I have tagged GPU, so I can limit the use of the number of instances using GPU and the regular one. I can create, for example, until 20, but the maximum of 5 instances in the host with GPU tag. It's the same for the premium SSD. In that case, I limit it to 3 gigabytes of disk space, and I have the total of 20. So in that case, I have here when I saw the limits used, I have, for example, 7 of 20 of the total instance limits, and GPU I already have used 3 of 5. The same for the primary storage. For example, I have 200 and I have 5 used here for 200 as well. Let's go to the next NAS backup and recover plugin. So administrator needed to first to configure a backup repository like others like Vim, Dell Network, and Backroll. You have a new option, it's NAS backup repository. You need, in that case, I enable only NFS to be supported here in that zone. So you need just to select it and define the zone. It is at the zone level, is important to say, and support only KVM hosts. So when configured, so you have it here. User can, in that case, consume these resources. For example, let me just here and have some extra options. For example, configure a backup schedule for hourly basis, daily and weekly and monthly basis. So define minute and time zone here. And you have a list of scheduled backup here. When you have the backup ready, I have already 2 here, you go to, you have a new option, Restore Instance Backup. Create a volume to attach it to an existing instance and remove instance from this backup offering. So, or you have the option to delete the backup as well.
Marco, do you mind if I just make a point there? Because I'm just looking at some of the questions. There's quite a few questions around this. That the backup and recovery framework, which is what gives you the user the ability to press backup, to press restore, to do all of these things. That's been in CloudStack 4.14, 4.15 for quite a few years. The new piece here is instead of that being pushed out to a third-party backup vendor, this backup repository, this NAS-based repository is in CloudStack. So this is still using that existing framework, which you can still use with Veeam or Backroll or any of the others, but this just gives a quick out-of-the-box solution instead of having to use a third party. So there are a few different questions on that, Mark. I thought I'd sort of mention those then. Okay,
let me just get how can I access here the chat? Wait a minute, please.
No, Marco, it's fine. It's fine. I've answered them there.
Okay, great. It's really, for example, if you don't have other option, you need to backup your instance. I think you have a way inbox inside the CloudStack offering option to you backup your instance as well. It's different of snapshots. All the time it will do a full backup in each backup. It consumes more space in the disk for the backup one, but it's a really cool feature to recover your instance if you need that. So next one is dynamic and static routing. So let me show a little bit about this. At the zone level, you have new options here for static routing, IPv4 subnet. You can define here the subnet you want to add and offer. For example, in that case, it is reserved to this account, specific account. And you have, for example, AS number to define the AS number range you use in your zone, and BGP peers, so your upstream router with BGP configured with the IP gateway address and IPv6 as well, so with the AS number as well. So that's it in terms of zone configuration. It's important to say that when you are creating, you need to provide to the users a network offering should they consume this kind of network. In that case, I created a dynamic routing offering here. It's so already created. When the user go through create a new isolated or VPC network, they have to select the dynamic routing in that case here. So it's enough in the user can, in that case, to create the instance based on this. So when creating, for example, the administrator are creating a network offering, they have new options here. First, I show it in the slides, but I show again. They can use the net. Is the traditional one used in CloudStack. They have the option to select routed. In that case, the mode, it could be static or dynamic. And so you have less service than netted, as many services used in net, like source net, static net, port forwarding, security group, and others, not used. So load balancer, it's no need to be used in routed mode in that case. So in that case, the instance you have, for example, the public IP address set directly, and the user have here the information about the upstream for IPv6 and IPv4 routes, and they have they can configure the firewall directly from for the network here. You can define a source and destination. You can select a specific instance in that case, and the source one. So you can do it for IPv4 and IPv6 firewall. And the last one I will present today in the demo is a security group in shared network. So the first thing when creating a shared network, so you have here a new option offering for shared security group enabled network. I use in that case this network offering here. So you'll be a traditional shared network, but you have you can filter package for in and outbound from the network. I have one created here. So with the IP addresses used here in the security group network, when the user consume, you have yes, here under network you have a new item here. It's a security group here. So you have many different security groups. You can add, input the information, and you can as well configure ingress rules and egress rules, It's very similar to Amazon, how Amazon managed the networks, Giles. And that's it.
Great.
Great.
Thank you, Marco. Great demo.
Welcome.
We've got a little bit of time for some questions.
Thank you, Marco. Thank you, Giles. I'm starting with the questions. I already answered a few because we don't have a lot of time. So you can see on the answer tab 4 questions which are already answered. And I start with the first one. Any plans to support object store for backup alongside NAS?
It's a great question. Plans, no. In terms of, discussions, actual work going on in the community. I know it's been discussed a little, and I'm not sure who's asked the question, but yeah, we'd love your input on that, because I get there's a logical reason to do that. It would be a sensible thing, but no, there's no work in progress around that at the moment.
Thank you, Giles. One question coming from the live stream. The world is going away from VMware. Why did CloudStack community add VMware NSX support in 4.20?
I thought somebody might ask that. I mean, CloudStack has always been multi-hypervisor. That's one of its strengths. And there are still a lot of significant organizations who are running CloudStack on top of VMware. And not all of them have suffered the same pain that a lot of the rest of the world have with what's changed at VMware recently. And I mean, the background with that feature is there was a particular large CloudStack user who wanted to have that integration, and it was contributed. So I think, we will see, the development on support of VMware and CloudStack, we will see that continue. Although in the context that we also see a massive movement away from VMware towards other open source hypervisors underneath CloudStack. But yeah, I get it's a bit of a weird thing to see when the whole story is around people who are moving away from VMware. Get it?
Good. Next one. Does safe RGW object storage work with RGW nodes behind the hub proxy? So maybe whether it works behind the hub proxy, maybe that's the question.
An HA proxy.
HA proxy.
Yes, I'm pretty sure we'd have to obviously be configured. I don't know, Marco, do you know got any more on that?
I think it's possible. You need to configure it externally. You can continue using that. Yeah, sure.
Don't see why not.
Depending on the defined architecture for the application in that case.
We have a very interesting comment on the chat. Obviously, we have also some people from VMware in the webinar. Going to the next one. Are security groups supported on VPC tier instances?
Don't think so. Only on isolated, I think. I'd need to double check. No, I can't think why. What would be the logical reason for wanting to do so? But no, I don't think I don't know categorically, but I don't think they are.
Good. Another question. Just let me navigate through the interfaces from the live stream. Are dynamic and static routing features support for VPC or isolated network? Both.
Both. In that case, both are supported for both isolated and VPC networks.
Thank you, Marco. Can someone add regions if they had already configured CloudStack with one region?
They add is this a question? Can they add a region if they've already configured?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, regions aren't so commonly used in CloudStack. They're a sort of an optional top-level construct. I think that question was probably in relation to one of the features. I don't know. Does it? One of the features we were talking about? Does it mention?
Maybe it's just a generic question over CloudStack with somebody. if somebody is new to CloudStack, just email us. We have a lot of videos on the YouTube channel of Sheibu, a lot of blog articles. So if you're new, just email us. We can send you a bit more information on how to get started. Plus, we have a POC guide, which you can download, and step by step, you can check everything. Okay, going to the next question. We're planning to deploy a new zone using 4.20. Which hypervisor it will be interesting to use for best used this new feature? Maybe that's related to specific feature which Marco showed, KVM or XCP-ng. It is necessary to be open source for now.
Yeah, I think again, what's probably happened, somebody's asked that in relation to one of the features, and we don't know which one it is.
Daniel, maybe if you can specify on the chat which feature exactly you mean, or if Marco can give some general guidance if you need to choose between KVM or XCP-ng.
It depends of the use case he has. You know, it's for example, if the XCP-ng fit to him, and if he no need, for example, the NAS backup because it's not supported, other feature in 4.24 that is supported only in the 4.20, it's related to KVM, for example, feature related to KVM. I indicate if he does need that, I think he can use XCP-ng or KVM, both in that case. I mean, in terms of storage, I think XCP-ng can offer more flexibility considering block storage, but KVM can offer more exciting features when they wanted to use something different related with a new feature with 4.20. That's my point. It's
Thank you, Marco. A lot of questions, and we have like 2 minutes more. There is a question about, can you please show the backup plugins available in 4.20? Maybe we will not have enough time for this.
We can list them. We have a plugin for Veeam. There's an open source technology called Backroll, Dell Network, or I think it's renamed Dell Total Network Recovery or whatever. Now the NAS backup option, and I did say I'm privileged enough to know of some other vendors who are currently working on plugins at the moment.
Okay. One question from Steven: if maybe the primary storage can be accessed from the zone or the cluster only. I have an environment I built on AWS. I tried to use the AWS EFS as the primary storage, but failed. But secondary storage works fine for AWS. Why and how to fix it? Or the CloudStack is designed like that?
It's designed like, well, it's not CloudStack, it's the hypervisor, right? So your primary storage is where your hypervisor runs. And did he say he's doing it on EFS?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, no. That's, yeah, don't do that. That's never going to work. You need some primary storage that the hypervisor can mount. That's by design in CloudStack.
In that case, for example, using XCP-ng or Zen server, it's the primary storage is only for the cluster. In that case, cluster level. When you use, for example, VMware and KVM, you can set it to the zone level primary storage, but depending on the storage you are using as well.
Okay, last question, because we're really running out of time. When using webhooks, can you modify or affect the normal workflow, either as a user or administrator? For example, can you modify the virtual machine parameters or add or modify the domain XML elements based on virtual machine setting and custom logic?
Not with the webhooks directly, but of course, what you could do is have a webhook endpoint, which then called the CloudStack API to go and do whatever you need to do. But no, you can't modify the payloads in the webhooks, which I think is what the question is there.
Okay, it's already past 4 o'clock my time, 2 o'clock British time. So I just want to say thank you, Giles, thank you, Marco, for this insightful webinar. If there are more questions which are not answered, just email us or write us in the social media. And yeah, have a great day, everybody.
Cheers, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.